There are certain moments that alter the course of your life in ways you never imagined. You don't see them coming. They sneak up on you when you're busy with the mundane, when you're folding laundry or washing dishes, when you're standing in the shower, thinking about nothing in particular. That's when it happens. That's when life turns upside down. For me, it started with a knock at the bathroom door. At 55, I thought I had everything figured out. A steady marriage, a loving husband, and the predictable rhythms of a life well lived. But that knock shattered it all, and behind it was a face I never expected. Grant, the son of my best friend Beatrice, had grown up around me, a fixture at family dinners and holiday gatherings. I'd watched him turn from an awkward teenager into a confident young man, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that knock would come, or what would happen after it. What happened next should never have happened, but it did. And what followed? Well, that's where things got truly dangerous. My name is Eliza, and for the better part of my adult life, I've played the role of a dutiful wife, a caring mother, and a loyal friend. My husband, Roland, and I have been married for 30 years. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in New Jersey, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Our daughter, Alicia, moved to California a few years ago, and now it's just the two of us in the house that once buzzed with the sounds of family life. For years, I thought I had the perfect life. Roland worked as an architect, designing homes for other people while we lived in the one we had built together. I spent my time volunteering at the local community center, attending book clubs, and meeting friends for coffee. Among those friends was Beatrice, my best friend since high school. We had been through everything together: marriages, kids, the ups and downs that came with it all. Yet Beatrice's son, Grant, was part of that history. I'd known him since he was a baby, watched him grow up alongside Alicia, playing in our backyard, laughing over dinner on family vacations. He was always polite, sweet, the kind of boy you never had to worry about. That is, until he wasn't. Grant had gone through a rough patch after his father passed away. He had been only 22 at the time, just starting his career as a software developer, when the sudden loss hit him hard. Beatrice was beside herself with grief, and I tried to be there for both of them. I would check in on Grant from time to time, offering a shoulder to lean on or a home-cooked meal when Beatrice couldn't be there. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I wasn't sure exactly when things shifted between me and Grant. Maybe it was the day he came over to help me with the garden. Roland was away on a business trip, and the weeds had started to take over the flower beds in our backyard. Grant had always been willing to lend a hand, and when Beatrice suggested that her son come over to help me out, I didn't think twice about it. He showed up early that Saturday morning, dressed in a worn-out t-shirt and jeans, looking every bit like the young man I'd watched grow up. We spent the first part of the morning pulling weeds, chatting about his work and his plans. Grant had become a successful software developer, and Beatrice always bragged about how proud she was of him. I was proud too, in a way. He was like a second son to me. But that day, something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was the way his gaze lingered on me a little too long, or the way he stood a little too close. Whatever it was, I brushed it off, telling myself that I was imagining things. Grant had always been kind and respectful. There was no reason to think anything had changed. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, we decided to take a break. I invited him inside for lemonade, and we sat on the back porch, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of easy conversation that comes from knowing someone for years. But then, out of nowhere, Grant asked me something that caught me off guard. "Are you happy, Eliza?" I blinked, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, his gaze focused on the glass in his hands. "I mean, are you happy with your life with Roland? You seem a little lonely sometimes." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Lonely? Was that what I had become? I hadn't thought much about it before, but now, with Grant sitting across from me, I realized that maybe he was right. Roland and I had drifted apart over the years. We weren't unhappy exactly, but we weren't close either. We lived side by side, two people going through the motions of a life we had built together but rarely intersecting. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "It's just, things change over time." Grant looked at me then, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. "You deserve to be happy, Eliza." For a moment I didn't know what to say. His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I should have brushed it off, should have changed the subject. But instead I sat there, feeling a strange warmth spread through me. It had been so long since someone had said something like that to me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that moment stuck with me, and looking back now, I realized that it was the first crack in the wall I had built around my life. A few weeks passed after that conversation with Grant, and I tried to push it out of my mind. I told myself that it was nothing, that I was reading too much into things, but the truth was, something had shifted inside me. I began to notice the gaps in my marriage with Roland more acutely. The quiet dinners, the lack of conversation, the way we lived more like roommates than husband and wife. I couldn't remember the last time we had done something just for the two of us, something that made me feel close to him. Then came the day everything changed. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon, and I had just finished cleaning the house. Roland was out of town again, this time on a week-long trip for work, and I had the place to myself. I decided to take a long, hot shower to relax, to wash away the unease that had been creeping up on me ever since that day in the garden with Grant. I was standing under the stream of water, lost in my thoughts, when I heard a knock at the bathroom door. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Who could it be? Roland wasn't due back for days, and I hadn't heard anyone come in. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. There was no response, just silence. I quickly turned off the water, wrapping a towel around myself as I stepped out of the shower. My heart was pounding in my chest as I opened the bathroom door, half expecting to find no one there. But when I stepped into the hallway, I saw him. Grant. He was standing there, his face unreadable, his clothes soaked from the rain. For a moment we just stared at each other, neither of us saying a word. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating, and I knew that something was about to happen, something I wasn't prepared for. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to see you," Grant said, his eyes locked on mine. I should have told him to leave. I should have walked away, closed the door, and put an end to whatever was happening between us. But instead, I stood there, frozen in place, as Grant took a step toward me. "You deserve to be happy, Eliza," he whispered, echoing the words he had said to me that day in the garden. Before I could stop him, he reached out and touched my arm, his fingers warm against my skin. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me, and in that moment I felt something inside me snap. I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I had thought about. It just happened, and once it did, there was no going back. The days after that kiss were a blur. I could hardly think straight, consumed by guilt and confusion. I had betrayed Roland, betrayed Beatrice, betrayed everything I had ever known, but at the same time I couldn't stop thinking about Grant. I couldn't stop thinking about how alive I had felt in that moment, how much I had wanted him. We didn't talk about what had happened, not at first. Grant went back to his life and I tried to go back to mine, pretending that nothing had changed, but it had. Every time I saw him, whether it was at Beatrice's house or when he stopped by to help me with something, I could feel the tension between us, the unspoken desire that lingered just beneath the surface. Then, one evening when Roland was out for a business dinner, Grant showed up at my house again. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I know this is wrong, but I can't help it." Neither could I. We didn't even make it past the hallway before we were kissing again, our hands fumbling in the darkness as we stumbled toward the living room. It was reckless, dangerous, and filled with guilt, but I couldn't stop myself. I had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. The affair began that night. We met in secret, stealing moments whenever we could when Roland was away, when Beatrice wasn't around, when no one would suspect. It was exhilarating, like nothing I had ever experienced before. But with each passing day, the guilt grew stronger. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, that it would destroy everything if anyone ever found out, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. Grant was like a drug. He made me feel alive, made me feel wanted in a way that I hadn't felt in years, and I wasn't ready to give that up, no matter the cost. As the months went by, the weight of the affair began to take its toll. I was constantly on edge, afraid that someone would find out, that Roland or Beatrice would discover the truth. I became paranoid, second-guessing every decision, every word, every glance. I avoided Beatrice more and more, unable to face her without feeling the crushing weight of my guilt. But it wasn't just my relationship with Beatrice that was suffering. Roland had started to notice the change in me too. He would ask why I seemed so distant, why I was always distracted, why I didn't want to spend time with him like we used to. I told him I was just stressed, that I had a lot on my mind, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I wanted to stop. I wanted to end the affair and go back to the life I had before. But every time I tried to pull away, Grant would reel me back in. He would show up at my house or send me messages late at night, reminding me of what we had, of how much he wanted me. And the truth was, I wanted him too. But the guilt was becoming too much to bear. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything but the lies I was living. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. And then it did. The day everything unraveled started like any other. I was at home preparing dinner for Roland when I got a call from Beatrice. Her voice was tight, strained, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. "We need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe, my heart pounding in my chest as I drove there. I had a sinking feeling in my gut, a feeling that told me that my secret was about to come to light. When I arrived, Beatrice was already sitting at a table, her hands clasped tightly around a cup of coffee. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I know about you and Grant." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. My worst fear had come true. Beatrice knew. She knew everything. I don't know what to say," I stammered, my mind racing as I tried to come up with an explanation, an excuse, anything. "Don't bother," Beatrice said, her voice cold. "I don't need to hear your excuses. I trusted you, Eliza. I trusted you with my son, and this is what you do. How could you?" I had no answer. There was nothing I could say to make it right. The betrayal in her eyes was too deep, too raw. Beatrice stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't want to see you again," she said, her voice breaking. "We're done." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me sitting there, my entire world crumbling around me. Beatrice's words echoed in my mind for days. I couldn't shake the image of her face, the anger and betrayal in her eyes. My stomach churned with guilt every time I thought about it, but there was nothing I could do. I had crossed a line that could never be undone. Roland hadn't noticed anything unusual at first. He was busy with work and his upcoming project deadlines, so my distance went mostly unnoticed. But as the days turned into weeks, even he couldn't ignore the changes. I was jumpy, avoiding his touch, and lost in my own thoughts far too often. One night after dinner, he finally confronted me. "Eliza, what's going on with you?" he asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. "You've been distant. Is something bothering you?" I froze, my heart racing in my chest. The urge to tell him the truth surged up inside me, but I swallowed it down, forcing a weak smile. "I'm just tired, Roland. It's nothing." He wasn't convinced. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "We've been together for 30 years. I know when something's wrong. Please, talk to me." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, and for a moment I considered telling him everything. But I couldn't. I couldn't bear the thought of destroying the life we had built, the marriage that had once been so strong. Instead, I pulled my hand away, standing up from the table. "I'm fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just need some space." Roland watched me leave the room, his expression filled with confusion and hurt. But he didn't push me further, not yet. Meanwhile, Grant's behavior had become increasingly erratic. He would text me at all hours of the night, sometimes angry, sometimes apologetic, always demanding my attention. It was as if the guilt was eating away at him too, but instead of backing off, he became more obsessed. I tried to distance myself from him, to end the affair once and for all. But every time I tried, Grant would find a way to pull me back in. He would show up at my house unexpectedly or call me repeatedly until I answered. It was suffocating. One afternoon, while I was at the grocery store, I received a message from him. "We need to talk." "I'm coming over." My heart sank. I didn't want to see him, didn't want to get dragged back into the mess we had created. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another message. "If you don't talk to me, I'll tell Roland everything." I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, my mind racing. Grant had never threatened me like that before. Panic surged through me, and I quickly texted him back, agreeing to meet him later that evening. When I got home, my hands were shaking as I prepared dinner for Roland. I could hardly focus, my thoughts consumed by the looming confrontation with Grant. I knew I had to end it once and for all, but I had no idea how to do it without everything falling apart. That night, after Roland went to bed, I snuck out of the house to meet Grant. We had arranged to meet at a park a few miles away, a place where we could talk without being seen. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled into the parking lot, spotting his car already there. He was standing by the swings, his hands in his pockets, looking out over the dark playground. For a moment I hesitated, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. I didn't want to go through with this. I didn't want to see him. But I knew I had no choice. As I approached, Grant turned to face me, his expression hard to read. He looked different than I remembered, more intense, more desperate. "We need to end this," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I can't do this anymore, Grant. It has to stop." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw clenched. "You think you can just walk away? After everything?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "We made a mistake, but it's over now. We can't keep doing this." For a moment he said nothing. Then he took a step toward me, his eyes dark. "You don't get to decide when it's over, Eliza. We're in this together. You can't just walk away from me." Fear gripped me. I had never seen this side of him before. The charming, sweet boy I had known for so long was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "I don't want to hurt Roland," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Grant's eyes flashed with anger. "And what about me? What am I supposed to do? You can't just throw me away like this." I took a step back, my heart racing. "I'm not throwing you away. But this has to end, Grant. I'm sorry." For a moment I thought he might lash out. that the anger bubbling just beneath the surface would explode, but instead he turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You're going to regret this," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and dangerous. I left the park that night, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. The conversation had left me shaken, terrified of what Grant might do next, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. When I got home, Roland was waiting for me. He was sitting in the living room, his face pale, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Where were you?" My heart sank. I hadn't expected him to be awake, hadn't prepared myself for this conversation. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. "Eliza, please," Roland said, his voice breaking. "What's going on? I know something's wrong. Just tell me the truth." The weight of the lies I had been carrying crushed me in that moment. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I've been lying to you." The silence that followed my confession was unbearable. Roland stared at me, his face contorted with disbelief and pain. I could see the questions forming in his mind, the accusations he was too stunned to voice. You've been lying to me," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" I couldn't look at him. My hands trembled as I twisted the fabric of my shirt, trying to find the courage to continue. "It's about Grant," I said, my voice shaking. I've been seeing him. We've been involved." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, each one cutting deeper into Roland's heart. I could see the shock in his eyes, the way his entire world seemed to collapse in an instant. He stood up from the couch, pacing the room as if he was trying to make sense of it all. "You've been." With Grant, he repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. "Beatrice's son." I nodded, unable to speak. The guilt weighed heavily on me, crushing me under its weight. "How could you?" Roland asked, his voice rising in anger. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Tears streamed down my face as I tried to explain, but no words could make it right. I had betrayed him in the worst way possible, and there was no coming back from that. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake," Roland shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You think this is just a mistake? You've destroyed everything, Eliza." I flinched at the harshness of his words, the raw emotion behind them. I had expected anger, but hearing it from him, seeing the pain in his eyes, was more than I could bear. "I didn't want to hurt you," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Roland shook his head, his face filled with disgust. "I trusted you. We've been married for 30 years, and this is how you repay me." "I know," I whispered, my tears falling freely now. "I know I've hurt you, but I never stopped loving you. I'm so sorry." But my words fell on deaf ears. Roland's anger and hurt were too overwhelming, and there was nothing I could say to make it better. Without another word, Roland grabbed his coat and stormed out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the wreckage of our marriage. The days that followed Roland's departure were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything except the pain I had caused. My phone buzzed with messages from Grant, but I ignored them. I couldn't face him, couldn't face the consequences of my actions. Beatrice didn't call. I had betrayed her too, and I knew that there was no coming back from that. Our friendship was over, and the thought of it left a hollow ache in my chest. I had lost everything: my husband, my best friend, and the life I had spent years building. And for what? A fleeting affair, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. As the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that I had no one to blame but myself. I had made the choices that led me here, and now I had to live with the consequences. Grant, on the other hand, wasn't so willing to let go. He showed up at my house one afternoon, banging on the door until I had no choice but to let him in. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tired and defeated. "I want to talk," he said, his tone insistent. "You've been ignoring me, and I don't understand why." "Because it's over, Grant," I said, my voice shaking. "We made a mistake. This can't go on." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You don't get to decide that, Eliza. We're in this together." "No," I said, shaking my head. "We're not. It's over." The anger in his eyes was unmistakable, and for the first time I felt a flicker of fear. "You think you can just walk away from me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything." "I don't want to hurt anyone anymore," I whispered. "Please, Grant, just leave." But he didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he stared down at me. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice filled with venom. Before I could respond, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. A few weeks after that confrontation, something strange happened. Grant disappeared. Beatrice called me, frantic, asking if I had heard from him. I hadn't. No one had. He wasn't answering his phone, and no one had seen him since the day he left my house. At first I thought he was just trying to scare me, trying to manipulate me into reaching out to him. But as the days passed and there was still no sign of him, I began to worry. Beatrice went to the police, filing a missing persons report. The entire town was buzzing with rumors about where he could have gone, what might have happened to him. But I knew the truth. Grant had left because of me, because I had ended things, because I had walked away. The guilt weighed on me every day. I had ruined everything, and now Grant was missing, and it was all my fault. It wasn't until a month after Grant disappeared that I found the note. It was tucked inside my mailbox, folded neatly in an envelope with no return address. My hands shook as I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. The note was short, only a few lines, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. "You think you can get rid of me that easily? I'm not gone. I'm just waiting." I stood there, frozen, the note trembling in my hands. Grant was still out there somewhere, watching, waiting. And I knew, in that moment, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot.
I never thought my life would unravel because of a swimming lesson. When people talk about mistakes, they rarely mention how small they can start, like the faintest ripple that grows into a tidal wave. For me, it began with a hand under the water, steadying my balance as I learned to swim in my own backyard pool. It's strange, looking back now, how something so mundane could become the centerpiece of a story I'd never dare tell anyone aloud. Except, of course, to you. His name was Jared Lowe. He was my son's best friend, and his laugh echoed through my house often enough that I barely noticed it anymore. Jared was one of those rare people who could light up a room without even trying, always full of jokes and energy. I never paid him much attention beyond being Aiden's guest. At least not until he offered to teach me how to swim. I should have said no. I could have laughed it off or politely declined. But I didn't. I said yes, and that yes changed everything. I don't know if I can explain what happened in the days that followed. Some of it felt inevitable, like gravity pulling me toward something I didn't understand. Other parts felt reckless, like watching myself from the outside, unable to stop. And then, there were the parts I couldn't have anticipated at all. The danger, the betrayal, the choices that brought me to where I am now. It wasn't just Jared, of course. He was the spark. But the fire spread farther than either of us could have imagined. I'm not even sure if I regret it. I think, maybe I regret everything else more. So, if you want to understand how my life unraveled, you'll have to start there. With the swimming lesson. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Jared made the offer. The summer heat had settled over the neighborhood like a thick blanket, the kind that left the air heavy and still. Aiden and Jared were lounging by the pool, tossing a volleyball back and forth while I sat under the shade of an umbrella with a book I wasn't really reading. "You don't swim?" Jared asked suddenly, breaking the rhythm of their game. I looked up, startled. His eyes were on me, bright and amused, as though the idea of someone not swimming was the most curious thing he'd heard all day. "I can swim," I replied, though my tone wasn't convincing even to me. "I just don't enjoy it." Jared tilted his head, his grin widening. "That sounds like code for I never learned." Aiden laughed, throwing the volleyball toward Jared. "She's always been scared of water," he said. "You should have seen her on vacations when I was a kid, always by the pool, never in it." "That's not true," I protested weakly. "I was just cautious." Jared stood, brushing water from his chest. "Well, lucky for you, cautious people make great learners. Come on, I'll teach you." The suggestion caught me off guard. I glanced at Aiden, half expecting him to dismiss it as a joke, but he just shrugged, clearly uninterested. "It's easy," Jared continued, his tone light, "and you've got a whole pool to practice in. What better place to start?" "I'm not sure," I began, but Jared was already stepping out of the water, extending a hand toward me. "Trust me," he said, his voice steady. "You'll be swimming laps in no time." It wasn't that I was truly afraid of water. I'd been in pools before, wading into the shallow end or floating with the help of an inflatable raft. But learning to swim? That felt like a challenge I'd avoided for so long it had become part of who I was. But Jared had a way of making things seem effortless, his confidence infectious. Before I knew it, I was standing at the edge of the pool, toes curled over the concrete as he demonstrated a few basic strokes. "Start with floating," he said, his voice calm and encouraging. "The hardest part is trusting the water to hold you up." I stepped into the water cautiously, the coolness shocking against my skin. Jared waded in beside me, his hands steadying my arms as I leaned back, letting myself float. "Good," he said, his voice close. "See? Not so bad." I felt the tension in my shoulders ease as I let myself relax, Jared's hands still firm beneath me. For a moment, I forgot how ridiculous I must have looked, a grown woman being taught to float in her own backyard. "You're a natural," Jared said, grinning. "Next thing you know, you'll be doing laps around Aiden." The mention of Aiden brought me back to reality. I glanced toward the house, half expecting to see him standing at the window, watching us, but the blinds were drawn, the yard quiet except for the faint hum of cicadas. We continued the lesson for another half hour, moving from floating to simple strokes. Jared's instructions were clear and patient, his tone always light-hearted but never patronizing. By the time we finished, I was more comfortable in the water than I had been in years. "You did great," Jared said as we climbed out of the pool. "You just needed a little push." I laughed, wrapping a towel around myself. "Maybe next time, I'll even try swimming on my own." "Next time you'll be racing me," he replied, his grin wide. Over the next week, the swimming lessons became a regular part of Jared's visits. Aiden didn't seem to mind, spending most of his time scrolling through his phone or watching TV while Jared and I practiced in the pool. At first, I told myself it was just a way to pass the time, a harmless distraction from the monotony of my days. But as the lessons continued, I began to notice the subtle shift in our dynamic. Jared's compliments became more frequent, his laughter more intimate. He started finding excuses to linger after our lessons, sitting with me by the pool or helping me tidy up the patio. "You're not like other moms," he said one afternoon, his tone casual but his eyes serious. I raised an eyebrow, half amused. "Is that a compliment?" "It is," he replied, his grin softening. "You're different, in a good way." I brushed off his words, laughing lightly, but a part of me couldn't ignore the way they made me feel. Seen, appreciated, even desired. It was during one of those quiet afternoons, as the sun dipped low in the sky, that the first crack appeared in the wall I had so carefully built around myself. We were sitting by the pool, the air warm and heavy with the scent of chlorine and blooming jasmine. Jared had just finished recounting a story from his college days, his laughter echoing through the yard. "Thanks for this," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my voice. "For the lessons, and for everything." Jared turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. You don't have to thank me, he said softly. I enjoy spending time with you. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words. I felt his gaze linger on me, the air between us charged with a tension I hadn't realized was there until that moment. I should have looked away. I should have said something to break the spell. But I didn't. The shift happened gradually, in moments so small and fleeting that I hardly noticed at first. A lingering glance, the brush of his hand against mine, a joke that felt just a little too personal. These were the cracks in the dam, each one weakening my resolve. The afternoon after that quiet moment by the pool, Jared returned to the house alone. Aiden had gone to visit a friend, leaving us with an excuse to have one more lesson. I thought you'd cancel, I said as I met him at the door, surprised to see him without Aiden in tow. Jared shrugged, his easy grin in place. I figured you'd need a break from Aiden's heckling. Besides, we've got work to do. There was a lightness to his tone, but as I followed him to the pool, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of something else. Something unspoken and electric. We started as usual, Jared guiding me through new strokes, his hand steady as he corrected my form. But as the lesson went on, the air grew heavier, the spaces between us shrinking until I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. You're getting good at this, Jared said after I finished a lap. He leaned against the pool's edge, his arms resting on the tiles as he watched me. I've got a good teacher, I replied, treading water. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft ripple of water and the distant hum of cicadas. When Jared finally broke the silence, his voice was quieter, more serious. Do you ever just let yourself relax? He asked. I frowned, caught off guard by the question. What do you mean? He shrugged, his gaze steady. You're always so composed, so in control. I just wonder if you ever let yourself stop thinking about everything. I didn't know how to respond. The truth was, I didn't let myself relax. Not fully, not since the divorce, not since the carefully constructed life I'd built had started to crumble around me. Before I could answer, Jared moved closer, his hand brushing against mine under the water. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. You deserve to, he said softly. You deserve to just let go. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was the vulnerability in his voice, or the way his gaze seemed to strip away all the walls I'd built around myself. Or maybe it was the simple fact that, for the first time in years, I felt seen. Whatever it was, I didn't stop him when he leaned in. I didn't pull away when his lips brushed mine, soft and tentative at first, as if giving me a chance to decide. Instead, I kissed him back. It was a quiet, gentle thing. Nothing like the whirlwind romances I'd read about in books or seen in movies, but it felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years. When we pulled apart, I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. This is a mistake, I whispered, my voice trembling. Maybe, Jared replied, his voice low, but it doesn't feel like one. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered confessions. Jared and I avoided Aiden as much as possible, finding excuses to meet when he wasn't around. We told ourselves it was just a fling, something that would fizzle out as quickly as it had begun. But it didn't fizzle. Instead, it grew, consuming every quiet moment I had. Jared became a fixture in my thoughts, his smile a constant presence in the back of my mind. We began meeting in the small guest house I used as a design studio, the only place where we could be alone without fear of discovery. I shouldn't be here, I said one evening as Jared pulled me into his arms. But you are, he replied, his voice warm and steady. And that's enough for me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this could be enough, that we could exist in this bubble of secrecy, without the outside world crashing in. But the guilt weighed on me, a constant reminder that we were standing on borrowed time. It didn't take long for Aiden to notice the change. He began asking questions. His tone light, but his eyes sharp. You and Jared have been spending a lot of time together, he said one afternoon, his gaze lingering on me as we sat in the living room. Should I be worried? I forced a laugh, brushing off his comment. Don't be ridiculous. He's just been helping me with the pool. Aiden smirked, though his expression didn't quite reach his eyes. Right. Helping you with the pool. His words sent a chill through me, but I did my best to play it off. I told myself that Aiden was just being paranoid, that there was no way he could know the truth. But the tension between us only grew. Aiden began watching Jared more closely, his casual jokes taking on an edge that made my stomach twist. It all came crashing down one evening when Aiden returned home earlier than expected. Jared and I had been in the guest house, our guard lowered by the quiet of the evening. The sound of the door slamming was like a thunderclap, jolting us both out of the moment. "Mom?" Aiden's voice echoed through the space, sharp and demanding. I froze, my heart pounding as Jared pulled away from me, his expression a mix of panic and guilt. "We have to," he began, but it was too late. Aiden appeared in the doorway, his face contorting as he took in the scene before him. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The look in his eyes, hurt, anger, betrayal, was more than I could bear. "Is this why you've been sneaking around?" he continued, his voice shaking. "With him?" Jared stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Aiden, Don't," Aiden snapped, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Don't you dare try to explain this." He turned to me, his eyes blazing. "I trusted you, Mom. I trusted both of you." And then he was gone, slamming the door behind him as he stormed out of the guest house. The silence that followed was deafening. Jared and I stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. "I'll talk to him," Jared said finally, his voice weak. "No," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is my mess. I'll deal with it." But as the hours passed and Aiden didn't return, I realized that fixing this wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. The night after Aiden discovered us was one of the longest of my life. I sat in the living room, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. My phone sat on the coffee table, the screen blank despite the messages I had sent him. "Please come home. We need to talk. I'm sorry." The words looked pathetic, even to me. I didn't know what to say, how to explain, or how to fix the chasm that had opened between us. Jared sat across from me, his face pale and drawn. He had offered to leave, but I told him to stay. At the time, I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was afraid of being alone. Maybe I thought his presence would help me feel less adrift. By morning, there was still no sign of Aiden. The guilt gnawed at me, sharp and relentless, as I stared out the window, watching the sunlight creep across the yard. "What if he doesn't come back?" I whispered. Jared, who had been pacing the room, stopped and turned to me. "He will," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But the hours stretched on, and by late afternoon, I couldn't take the waiting any longer. "I'm going to find him," I said, grabbing my car keys. Jared hesitated. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." I found Aiden at a bar near the university, sitting at a corner table with a drink in front of him. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped and his hair disheveled. For a moment I hesitated, unsure if he would even speak to me. But then he looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and the anger in his expression made my heart sink. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp and cold. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Aiden laughed, a bitter sound that made my chest ache. "Talk about what? About how you're sleeping with my best friend?" I winced at his words, the bluntness of them hitting me like a physical blow. "It's not what you think," I began, but Aiden cut me off. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't try to justify it. You lied to me, both of you, and now you want to act like it's something I can just accept?" "It wasn't planned," I said, my voice breaking. "It just happened." "That's not an excuse," Aiden said, his eyes blazing. "You're my mom. He's my friend. Do you have any idea what this has done to me?" I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his expression hardening. "I trusted you," he said quietly. "I trusted both of you, and you betrayed me." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth was undeniable. I had betrayed him, and no amount of justification could change that. When Aiden finally spoke again, his voice was steady but filled with resolve. "I'm leaving," he said. "What?" "I can't stay in that house. Not with him there. Not with you pretending everything's fine." "Aiden, please," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't do this. We can work through this. We can—" "No," he interrupted. "You made your choice, Mom. Now I'm making mine." Before I could respond, he stood and walked away, leaving me sitting alone at the table. Aiden's departure cast a shadow over everything. He moved into a small apartment near campus, cutting off contact with Jared entirely. He spoke to me only when absolutely necessary, his tone distant and clipped. The guilt weighed heavily on me, but Jared seemed determined to act as if everything was normal. He continued visiting the house, his presence a constant reminder of the rift between me and my son. "We can get through this," Jared said one evening as we sat in the guest house. "Aiden just needs time." But time wasn't helping. The more days passed, the more I felt the strain of the situation pulling me in different directions. My relationship with Jared, once thrilling and intoxicating, now felt like a source of endless tension and uncertainty. The cracks in our relationship deepened when Jared's secret finally came to light. It happened during a quiet evening at the house, when a man I didn't recognize showed up at the door. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a cold, calculating gaze that made my stomach twist. "Is Jared here?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. I hesitated. "Who's asking?" The man smirked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Let's just say I'm someone he owes a favor." Before I could respond, Jared appeared behind me, his expression darkening when he saw the man. "Victor," he said, his tone tense. "Jared," Victor replied, his smirk widening. "We need to talk." After Victor left, I confronted Jared, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "Who was that?" I demanded. Jared sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it," I said. "What's going on?" His gaze dropping to the floor. "I owe him money," he admitted. "Money?" "I made some bad decisions," he said, his voice quiet. "I got into gambling a while back and things spiraled." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't want to drag you into it," he said. "I thought I could handle it on my own." "But now he's here," I said, my voice rising. "What does he want from you?" Jared hesitated again, and the silence was enough to confirm my worst fears. "Jared," I said, my voice trembling, "how much do you owe him?" "Enough," he replied. "But I'll figure it out, I just need some time." Victor's presence loomed over us like a storm cloud. Jared became increasingly agitated, his confidence unraveling as the pressure mounted. I tried to help, offering to lend him money, but he refused. "I got myself into this mess," he said. "I'll get myself out." But his attempts to resolve the situation only seemed to make things worse. Victor began showing up more frequently, his demands growing more aggressive. The tension in the house reached a breaking point, leaving me feeling helpless and trapped. It was Aiden who ultimately forced the situation to a head. He showed up unannounced one evening, his expression hard as he stepped into the living room. "I heard about Victor," he said, his gaze shifting between me and Jared. "What the hell is going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain. But Jared, to his credit, didn't shy away. "I owe him money," Jared said. "I'm handling it." "Doesn't look like it," Aiden replied, his tone sharp. The confrontation escalated quickly, with Aiden accusing Jared of endangering me, and Jared firing back that Aiden had no right to judge. The argument grew heated, the tension in the room threatening to boil over. "Stop!" I finally shouted, my voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't solving anything." Aiden turned to me, his expression filled with frustration. "Mom, you need to get rid of him," he said. "He's a liability. He's putting you in danger." Jared bristled at the words, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. After Aiden's confrontation, the tension in the house became unbearable. Jared tried to convince me, and himself, that he could handle Victor, but his confidence seemed thinner with each passing day. "You don't have to be involved in this," he said one night as we sat in the guest house. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "It's my problem, not yours." "Don't lie to me," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. "Victor isn't just your problem anymore. He's coming to this house. He knows where I live." Jared ran a hand through his hair, his frustration clear. "I'm going to fix it, I swear. I just need more time." "Time for what?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Jared, this isn't going away on its own, and you're dragging me into it whether you mean to or not." The weight of the situation was pressing down on me, suffocating in its intensity. A part of me wanted to tell Jared to leave, to put as much distance as possible between myself and his problems. But another part, the part that still cared for him, couldn't bring itself to let him go. A few days later, Victor made his intentions clearer than ever. He showed up at the house again, this time waiting until Jared wasn't home. I had just returned from a trip to the grocery store when I found him leaning against the front door, his cold smile sending a shiver down my spine. "Cecilia," he said, his voice smooth. "Nice to see you again." "What do you want?" I asked, clutching my keys tightly in my hand. Victor tilted his head, his smile widening. "I think you know the answer to that. Jared owes me, and I'm not a patient man." "He's trying to pay you back," I said, my voice trembling. "Trying isn't enough," Victor replied. "I want results, and if I don't get them soon, well, let's just say I don't mind taking collateral." The implication was clear, and it sent a wave of fear crashing over me. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Victor chuckled, stepping back toward the sidewalk. "You might want to tell Jared to hurry up. Tick-tock, Cecilia." When Aiden found out about Victor's latest visit, he was furious. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he said, pacing the living room. "You're in danger because of him." "I can handle it," I replied, though even I didn't believe the words. "No, you can't," Aiden snapped. "Jared's not going to fix this. He's a mess, Mom. He's always been a mess." His words stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. Jared's charm and confidence had always masked a recklessness that I had chosen to overlook. "What do you want me to do?" I asked quietly. "Get rid of him," Aiden said. "Tell him to leave. You don't owe him anything, Mom. Not after everything he's put you through." But the idea of cutting Jared out of my life felt impossible. Despite everything, I still cared for him. I still believed there was good in him, even if it was buried beneath layers of bad decisions and desperation. That night, Jared returned to the house with a plan. "I have something Victor might take as payment," he said, his voice grim. "What is it?" I asked. Jared hesitated before pulling a small wooden box from his bag. Inside was a watch, elegant and clearly valuable. "It belonged to my grandfather," Jared said quietly. "It's worth enough to cover most of what I owe. Maybe all of it." I stared at the watch, my heart sinking. "Jared, are you sure about this?" "I don't have a choice," he replied. "It's either this or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. The next evening, Jared arranged to meet Victor at a secluded spot outside of town. I insisted on going with him, despite his protests. "If something goes wrong, I'm not letting you face him alone," I said firmly. Victor was waiting when we arrived, his car parked under a dim street lamp. He stepped out as we approached, his expression unreadable. Well, he said, his tone laced with amusement. "Look who decided to show up." Jared held up the box. "This is worth more than what I owe you. Take it and we're done." Victor opened the box, inspecting the watch with a critical eye. For a moment, I thought the plan might work. But then Victor's smile faded, and he closed the box with a snap. "This covers most of it," he said, his tone casual. "But not all of it." "What are you talking about?" Jared demanded. "That watch is worth a fortune." Victor shrugged. "Interest, Jared. You should have read the fine print." The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel Jared's anger building. "I don't have anything else," Jared said, his voice low. Victor's gaze shifted to me, and a chill ran down my spine. "You've got her," he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Jared stepped in front of me, his fists clenched. "Don't even think about it." Victor laughed, but the sound was devoid of humor. "Relax, Jared. I'm not interested in her, but you'd better figure something out, and soon." With that, he got back into his car and drove off, leaving us standing in the cold night air. The exchange with Victor marked a turning point in my relationship with Jared. The danger he had brought into my life was undeniable, and I could no longer ignore the toll it was taking on me. "We can't keep doing this," I said one evening as we sat in the guest house. Jared looked at me, his expression pained. "Cecilia, please. I'm going to fix this. I just need more time." "I don't have more time," I replied, my voice trembling. "I can't keep living like this, afraid of who's going to show up at my door, wondering if you're going to get yourself killed." Jared didn't respond, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I care about you," I continued, my voice softening. "But this isn't sustainable. You need to figure out your life, Jared, and I can't be a part of it anymore." Aiden's words echoed in my mind as I watched Jared pack his things. "You did the right thing," Aiden said when I told him about the decision. "He was never going to change, Mom. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." But even as I tried to convince myself that Aiden was right, part of me still felt the loss. Jared had been a mistake, yes, but he had also been a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, a reminder of who I used to be and who I could still become. When Jared left, the house felt emptier than ever. The danger Victor posed lingered in my mind, but with Jared gone, I hoped it would dissipate. Aiden began visiting more often, his presence a balm for the ache in my chest. Slowly, we started to rebuild our relationship, though the cracks left by the past few months would take time to heal. As for Jared, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had left town, moving to another state to start fresh. I wanted to believe he would find his way, that he would make better choices and build a life he could be proud of. But I also knew that his path was no longer tied to mine. The days after Jared left were eerily quiet. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my chest start to ease. Aiden was still distant, but he called more often, his tone softening with each conversation. "I'm glad he's gone," Aiden said during one of our calls. "Now you can focus on yourself again." I wanted to believe him, to trust that the worst was behind me. But the shadow of Victor lingered in the back of my mind. Jared had warned me before he left. Victor might not accept his absence as the end of the debt. One evening, as I prepared for bed, the doorbell rang. My heart sank as I approached the door, already knowing who would be on the other side. Victor stood there, his presence filling the space like a dark cloud. "Evening, Cecilia," he said, his voice smooth. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I think you know. Jared might be gone, but his debt isn't, and now it's your problem." "Jared doesn't live here anymore," I said. "That's irrelevant," Victor replied. "You were a part of this, Cecilia. You benefited from him, didn't you? So now, you're responsible." My breath caught in my throat as his words sunk in. "What do you expect me to do?" I asked. Victor leaned in, his gaze cold. "You'll pay me what he owes, or I'll make sure your life becomes very inconvenient." The next day I called Aiden, my voice shaking as I recounted Victor's visit. "This is why I told you to stay away from Jared," Aiden said, his frustration clear. "He's dragged you into a mess that isn't yours." "I know," I said, tears threatening to spill. "But what do I do now?" Aiden was silent for a moment before replying. "I'll handle it." "Aiden, no," I said quickly. "I don't want you involved in this." "You're my mom," Aiden said, his tone firm. "I'm not letting this guy ruin your life." Aiden arranged to meet Victor at a neutral location, an abandoned parking lot near the edge of town. I begged him to let me come, but he refused, insisting that he handle it alone. The hours ticked by slowly, each second stretching into an eternity as I waited for Aiden to return. When he finally did, his face was pale, but his expression was resolute. "It's done," he said simply. "What does that mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I paid him off," Aiden said. "It's over." "How?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. Aiden hesitated before replying. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that he's gone." But something in his tone told me there was more to the story than he was letting on. A week later, I learned the truth. Aiden hadn't paid Victor off with money. He had gone to the police, reporting Victor's illegal activities and providing evidence that Jared had secretly collected before he left town. Victor was arrested, his threats finally neutralized. But the fallout left me shaken. The weight of everything, the affair, the danger, the choices I had made, pressed down on me like a heavy burden. "You did the right thing," Aiden said when I confronted him about his actions. "Did I?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Or did I just make everything worse?" Aiden sighed, his expression softening. "Mom, you're human. You made mistakes, but you're still my mother. And I'm not going anywhere." His words brought a small measure of comfort, but the guilt lingered, a constant reminder of the chaos I had allowed into our lives. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild. The house, once filled with tension and fear, became a sanctuary again. Aiden visited often, our relationship slowly mending as we found common ground in the wake of everything we had endured. But even as life returned to a semblance of normalcy, I couldn't shake the memories of Jared. He had left without saying goodbye, disappearing into the horizon like a chapter I wasn't ready to close. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail, the handwriting unfamiliar. I opened it cautiously, my heart pounding as I unfolded the page. Cecilia, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for everything. You saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and for that, I'll always be grateful. I'm trying to start over, to make better choices and become the person you believed I could be. Maybe someday I'll be able to prove to you that it wasn't all for nothing. Take care of yourself and tell Aiden I'm sorry. He deserved better from both of us. The letter brought tears to my eyes, a mixture of sadness and closure. Jared's presence had left a mark on my life, one I would carry with me always. One evening, as the sun set over the backyard, I sat by the pool with a glass of wine in hand. The water shimmered in the fading light, its surface calm and still. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The chaos of the past weeks had given way to clarity, a reminder of the resilience I hadn't realized I possessed. I thought of Jared, of the lessons he had taught me about vulnerability and risk. I thought of Aiden, of the strength he had shown in protecting me even when I hadn't deserved it. And I thought of myself, of the mistakes I had made and the growth that had come from them. Life would never be the same. But that was okay. The waters might be deep, but I had learned to swim. As the stars appeared overhead, I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me one last time. I had loved, I had lost, and I had learned. And in the end, that was enough.